Welcome to the Microsoft Executive Spotlight Series. My name is Bhushan Bharat, and I'm one of the leaders at Microsoft Canada. I'm joined today by my colleague Ted Kempf, and we will be interviewing Peter Roberts, who's a VP and CIO at a company called Stern Partners. Over this session, we'll be talking a little bit about Stern Partners. We'll be talking about their business model. We'll be talking about how they're leveraging technology to meet their business growth drivers, and also some of the challenges that they're learning along the way as it pertains to their decision with the Microsoft Business Applications portfolio. But just before I get into it, let me share with you a little bit around Stern Partners. Stern Partners is an investor firm that was founded by Ronald N. Stern and is now managing plus 20 companies, generating revenues of around $1.75 billion, employing over 7,000 people. Some of the companies they have invested in include Old Phillips, Bootlegger, Clio, National Energy Equipment, Out TV, Western Glove Works, Warehouse One, McRae's Environmental, Perrin Logistics, Port Hawkesbury Paper, Ricky's Turling Horticulture, Thinking Box Media, West Key Graphics, Urban Barn, and Green Star Plant Products. Ted and I have invited Peter to come on today to share with us a little bit about their business model, their technology requirements, and also their decision to invest and partner with Microsoft. So without further ado, Peter, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to do this with us.
Well, thank you, Rich. Thank you, Ted. Thank you for the wonderful introduction and the description of Stern and talking about all our different companies. Very happy to be here and tell you a little bit about our business and certainly the relationship with Microsoft. Stern is not what one would think of, typically think of as a private equity firm. We're what's known in the business as a family office. So we don't recruit other people's capital. We manage an in-house fund, and then we use that to acquire and manage and operate businesses. I think the other big distinction for us is that we don't acquire companies with a view to divestiture. So, increasing the value and then divesting them or taking them public. I've been with Stern for about 11 years, and there's been exactly one divestiture in that time, and the portfolio is pretty much doubled. So we're really a buy, hold, and operate over the long term. Everything is looked at from a long-term perspective. So, I think a lot of things go into that, making sure that we have the right people, making sure that we understand the business that we're getting into, and to look for synergies within portfolio. So, for example, on the retail side, you mentioned quite a few of the brands that you referenced are retail companies. We started with one. We grew some capability and experience and expertise around that. And then we're able to acquire other complementary businesses, so other retail operating. And then that has given us other opportunities to expand. What we do, Stern, is we provide strategic services. So we will, provide investment, obviously. That's probably number one. Provide tax. So there's a lot of intelligence and thought and planning that has to go into managing the business from a tax perspective. From a legal perspective, we have two in-house counsel that provide legal advice and services to all of the companies. We would provide insurance services, so where there's mandatory insurance within our business, we provide that. And then, of course, something like technology, as we're talking about today. So that has been something that's really been a lot more focus has been put on over probably about the past 5 years, I would say. What other things do we do? For the most part, the businesses operate quite independently. So by that, I mean, we're not involved with them on a day-to-day basis. So we don't have somebody from Stern sitting at every one of the head offices of each of the companies. They're all very capable executives and managers for running the business. And we would interact with them on a regular basis, monthly or quarterly, and in some cases more frequently, depending on the initiatives they have at hand. But we look to again maybe take things like cybersecurity, for example. Microsoft licensing will probably be one of the best examples where we have identified that is something that is really ubiquitous in all of our companies. Almost all, in fact, I would say literally all of them are consuming Microsoft products and services. So we look to have a single agreement and a single vehicle, a single channel to work with a partner like Microsoft on.
Excellent. Peter, I'm going to jump in here. I'm going to formally welcome you and thank you for spending some time with us today. I'm going to ask you a question that I hope I don't have to ask you in the very near future. because I was like this. We didn't talk about COVID and the pandemic, and but it's a serious topic, and it's had a pretty significant impact on a lot of businesses. So could you share with us how you've had to flex and adjust given the pandemic, and whether your own organization or perhaps some of the portfolio companies that you work with?
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting. I was speaking to one of our other, really strong partners earlier this morning, and I coined a new phrase. I think it's the COVID anomaly. So we were talking about from a data perspective. We work with this firm to do a lot with respect to data on our retail side. And when we think about how we measure our businesses and how they measure and how they strategize using the data, it was always fairly simple in the past. You can compare to the previous year. So now, if you think about comparing the COVID year to the previous year, it is so incredibly different. And so do we assume that that is going to continue? And I think we have a lot of thinking we have to do about that. But it really has been something that has touched, I would say, all of our businesses, no question. As we mentioned earlier, the retail holdings, it was inescapable. The number of retail companies we have, 500 odd brick and mortar stores in traditional retail operations, that was inescapable. COVID was going to hit us and it was going to be negative. We had been very fortunate, I would say, maybe from foresight, we had enabled all of our retail companies on a single e-commerce and digital platform. So they were very well positioned. So even though there was a significant impact on the brick and mortar, the foot traffic side, our e-commerce actually was positioned to grow, and it did. And so we've seen some things that we don't actually see that slowing down, and we were able to take that improvement, those the increases that we've had, and actually grow upon them. On the non-retail side, it was really kind of a mixed bag. We have a couple of large paper company holdings, and they actually saw a bump in the increase in production, as you would sort of think with, lots of printing and things going on. We also hold a couple of companies that are in sort of kind of quasi-light manufacturing, and they were able to redirect and start producing PPE. So we had actually companies producing hand sanitizers and things like that. And then we had another company that produced plastics related to trade shows. And so they were able to convert that into shields. And a lot of that material was then consumed in our retail brand. So in a bit of a sense, it was a fortunate synergy that we had there. I do think that this is changing, materially going to change the way that everyone does business. We have seen, for example, simple things like more people working from home, and I really don't see that changing. I think we have some businesses where the real estate holdings, pardon me, for example, there's just no way around that. You have to have an investment in real estate. But when it comes to more of the corporate administrative type of roles, maybe we don't need to have the type of office space that we've always assumed that we needed to have. Working with tools such as this, where we're able to interact very effectively and efficiently, in some cases maybe even more efficiently, because we don't spend time on a plane flying somewhere. And we're certainly not investing a lot of money and capital on real estate.
That's a really interesting perspective, Peter. It's something that I find myself talking to a lot of people about, what will that post-COVID world look like? And will we continue just to buy at the pace in which we're buying or consuming online? And what does this mean for real estate? And companies like Microsoft have come out and said publicly, with approvals you can live where you would like to live, right? Mm-hmm. You're not constrained like you were before. So maybe some boost to productivity that we didn't see coming with this pandemic. So that being said, I'll turn it over to Rashawn.
Yeah, curious to know a little bit about competition, because I'm sure the position that you hold, being responsible for all these different industries or these companies serving customers in these different industries, I'm sure that there's a tone and then there's a culture that you have to drive to ensure that there's some method of standing out or standing strong against the competition. So maybe, Peter, if you could share with us a little bit about some of your unique differentiators in terms of what makes the companies that you represent stand out versus the competition?
Yeah, that's a quite an interesting question. I would say looking at it from the Stern perspective. So what makes Stern? How do we set ourselves apart from our competitors? Because that is the core of the business for myself is Stern. So again, the things that I talked about where we acquire businesses within portfolios we have expertise, but also in what we've done with investment in building platform. One of the companies that you mentioned when you were listing off the names is Parian Logistics. So Parian is a company that we started several years ago, initially to provide logistics services to all of the retail brands. So it really made sense. We were able to acquire a phenomenal logistics facility in the center of the country in Winnipeg. And we were able to provide all of the store transfers, all of the stock holding, and then all of the e-commerce fulfillment for all of those retail brands. From that, we were then able to add on some other layers, finance. So now all of the finance, the accounting, financial services for all of the retail companies, that is part of Parian Logistics. We've also added information technology, and now we're moving digital marketing and e-commerce into that. So we will have a shared services organization that will provide services for all of those companies. We look at that as an infrastructure, and that is a competitive advantage for us. So when we look at acquiring a new partner in retail, say even an online business, that's something that a lot of other PEs would not have. They've stayed very distributed, very vertical, whereas we have built this center of excellence, whatever you want to call it, that really can provide a huge amount of value and uplift to a partner that we would acquire. So I think that's important to think about from the Stern perspective. The retail side, again, it's the largest, not in terms maybe of revenues, but certainly in terms of concentration of companies of our portfolio. It's the largest group, and most of them, when you read off the name, anyone who's familiar with Canadian retail would recognize maybe all of those brands, because they're all kind of a legacy brand to some degree. They've been around for 40 or 50 years in some cases. And so there's a name recognition there. We do tend to leave the branding and the particular aspects to each brand, of course, because they have different target markets that they sell into. But I would say that loyalty, customer loyalty, is very common across all of the entities. So value selling products that are high value, providing great service, and then incenting customers to be loyal to the business. I think that's probably some of the core messages on the retail side. On the non-retail side, again, it's broader. There's more sectors involved, but I would say again, it really comes down to that sort of focus on quality. When I look at any one of our entities, I would say they're all kind of best in class at what they do. I think of our environmental services company, McRae's. They provide tremendous value to all the municipalities in the Lower Mainland when it comes to environmental services. Our paper company is the same thing. They've been around for, in some cases, longer than 50 years. Providing high quality products. So again, it would depend a little bit on the industry, I think.
Perfect. When you're presented as a company with a new investment opportunity, can you share with us some of the decision criteria that you go through to have one go through the gate versus kind of pushing a couple back? So in other words, what's a good fit for your organization criteria-wise?
So again, I think the fundamental one is do we have some knowledge, experience, expertise within the business? And when I say within the business, I don't just mean within the office of Stern, because we certainly lean on the I mean that in a good way, lean on the expertise and knowledge of the people that are operating companies. So for example, if we were looking at another retail investment, we would look at it initially. Do the numbers make sense? Is there a growth opportunity there? Are there synergies with our current portfolio? Could they take advantage? Would there be benefit and value to them from what we have done, the things that I described, for example, the shared services organization? Would that make sense? And then we would bring in, principals from some of our retail holdings, and they would have a chance to vet it and look at it and see, competitively, would it cause a problem? And then also, is there a collaboration or synergy opportunity from them? So those are some of the things that we look at in that area. And I would say it would be virtually the same. And in fact, when I think about some of the acquisitions that we've made recently, some of the acquisitions have been to actually add capacity to some of the holdings. Thinking Box, which is one of our really fastest growing companies, a digital agency, we've acquired, I'm going to say 4 or 5 companies in the past 2 years, literally to add in capacity and capability that Thinking Box did not have before. And so that's another avenue for growth. It's not just necessarily adding another separate entity, but bringing one in and merging it in with one of the existing brands. So that's something we've done quite a bit of.
Great.
I think this would be a good time, Peter, to talk a little bit about technology and innovation. We've talked a lot about the business. You and I have talked about this offline as well, just in terms of how Stern Partners is leveraging technology towards your business growth drivers and your specific outcomes. So maybe you can share with us a little bit about that.
Happy to. Well, that's truly, I guess, my field of expertise. The business is probably second to that. I think broadly speaking, I look at things in a kind of an engineering fashion, and I would say, looking at something, technology, we need to be able to make it relatable to the business when we talk about investments. Well, what are we going to invest in, and particularly when it comes to things at the enterprise level where we want to standardize. So we look at things, what Gartner calls the commodity layer. I tend to think of it more as foundational. I mean, that's the base. It's the really the infrastructure. Maybe 15 years ago it was servers and storage and network, and now it's much more ubiquitous than that. It's literally the core business application. So all of the core tools, desktop, laptop, communication technologies such as we're employing, ERP systems, CRM systems, data and analytics platforms. Those are really the table stakes in business, and we try and standardize as much as possible on those within a portfolio. For sure, we would really want to standardize, and I think that's probably one of the reasons why we're having this conversation and some projects we've been working on together in that area. We look at things where, again, Gartner talks about differentiator. I think of it as the competitive advantage. What is something that we can use technology for to really set us apart from our competitors? They are doing it as well, but we want to do it better. And so we need to find a better tool, a better platform, a better solution to do that. So that's where we really, I think, most effectively partner with companies such as Microsoft. And we only have a few that we work with in this regard, where we'll look for something that we can get to value out of very quickly, because competitive advantage, obviously, you want to get to value really, really quickly. So again, looking for solutions that are highly integrated, that we don't have to spend a lot of time building. We certainly don't want to be building things, period, but building integrations, we don't want to do that. Something that gives us a really easy and broad access to data, because that's really the lifeblood of business is data. We get to things like innovation, where we want to try something that other companies maybe are not doing, or very few are doing. The things that will give us a chance to maybe take a little bit of a leapfrog ahead of everybody if it's successful. The approach we take there is that's where we'll be more willing to build something. And what we try and do there is again work with a partner, and we've worked with Microsoft on several of these initiatives, and we take kind of a fail fast approach. So we'll identify something that's very narrow in scope, very easily measurable. Is this something that works? And if it doesn't, we'll move on very quickly from it. And then we look for partners, Microsoft being, I think, one of the best examples of that, who will co-invest in that. So Microsoft has some great programs that we've worked on with you, where you bring some investment to the table. We try something with one or more of the businesses. That'll give them a chance to jump ahead, and and go through that type of a process. That's been very successful, and we look to do more and more of that in the future.
Excellent. Well, thank you, and we very much appreciate the partnership, Peter. I think you talked about it a little bit just now, but I'm going to ask you to come in and share with us in a little more detail the journey that you've been on with Microsoft in particular, because it has been a multi-year journey, and it's an interesting one, right? Because you've got a variety of portfolio corporations that fall under it. So could you just share with us that and the role Microsoft's playing in your overall business model?
Yeah, I'm very happy to. So in my prior life, before I started working for Stern, I was actually responsible for running large services businesses and actually oversaw a Microsoft partnership on behalf of services companies. And so I really, I had great experience, or pardon me, a lot of knowledge of Microsoft and a lot of respect for capabilities. When it came to Stern, as I said, we typically let the companies operate very independently, and I think the relationship with Microsoft really reflected that. So each company had its own rep and its own relationship, and it was very evident that we were collectively we were missing out on a lot of opportunities. And by that I mean the operating companies, Microsoft, and Stern itself. And so one of the things that Microsoft and Stern worked very hard on, I would say over probably the last 4 or 5 years, is really establishing a real, true, direct partnership. So the Microsoft, all of the Microsoft relationship is managed through the Stern office, and we have really seen huge improvements in that. So the value that the businesses get from it, the type of, and it could be something as simple and fundamental as pricing, but it can also be something a lot more complex and more difficult to define, and that would be things like investment in the proof of concepts that I talk about. It would be very difficult for getting the kind of investment that you have been able to bring, because now we're talking about the entire scope of Stern. And so I think that's really helped all of us. And certainly I've been very, very impressed with how dedicated Microsoft has been towards that. So the people that they bring to the table, or you have brought to the table, such as yourselves and Pramila and all of the other folks that work on our account team, have really been testament to that. So, well, very, very, very happy. As I say, we only have a few really, I would say strategic partners when it comes to technology, and Microsoft is right at the top of that list.
Well, we're very grateful for that. So on behalf of the Microsoft team, I know you've done some tremendous work with our teams in terms of the successful partnership being established and setting Stern partners up for success. And so on behalf of the team, thank you so much for the partnership, and thank you for trusting us to be a part of that. I know you recently made the decision with the Microsoft Business Applications portfolio, aka Dynamics 365. Maybe you can share with us a little bit about what drove you towards the decision of Dynamics 365.
So I have a lot of experience working with the product set in its previous iterations, from the Exapta all the way up to where it is now, and have always had a lot of confidence in the product, and certainly in the ability to roll it out quickly, its flexibility, and really I think the way that it really has enabled customers to get comfortable with it quickly, reducing change management kind of concerns. From our perspective, we want to always buy versus build. We will only want to build where it's something that we need to get something to market really quickly, an innovative type of a solution. For something like an ERP platform, we want to rely on a vendor such as Microsoft to provide that platform. I think the thing that really sets the Microsoft cloud solution apart from the others is you really do have a cloud solution. I have worked with some of your competitors, names that I won't mention, but they really don't have the established fully cloud foundation that you do. And I think the other big thing that you have that maybe only one other one does is the expanse and the scope of your ecosystem. So the surrounding ecosystem for D365 is really very, very impressive, very powerful. one of the key things is, you pick a platform, you pick a partner such as Microsoft that builds and supports and maintains the platform. But then having access to choices around the services partners is really crucial. And I would say that you're right at the very, very top in that regard. So we want to be able to have options when it comes to who we work with for both the deployment and also support going forward. So I think those are probably the critical things. I think again, so having choices through the ecosystem. We know that we can trust Microsoft to bring the right partner to the table, but we also know that if for whatever reason that we need to expand that or need to change that we're able to do so, that we have a lot of choices in the marketplace when it comes to partners for Dynamics.
Excellent. So Peter, when I have an opportunity to talk to companies that are in the evaluation phase of picking a solution for their business, one of the things I say is the biggest challenge you're probably going to face is not necessarily picking the software, but getting people to use the software, because user adoption can be just as difficult. So talk to us a little bit about change management and the plans that you have used or techniques you've used to make this success.
Yeah, so that is a terrific question, and it would be typically something that you would have an enormous challenge with, because you would be, having people to stop using the old system and stop doing things the old way and learn a new way to do it. In this case, because we've created an entirely new organization, for the most part, this is a new solution, but it's for a new company. If you think about it that way, there's only a few people that will be using the product, the D365 product in the shared services environment, who were working on the older platforms. And in that case, fortuitously, they're moving from a very old and much more limited system in Great Plains to D365. So once you make sure that everybody that's the paradigm you're going through, is to adopt the best practice and leverage it as much as possible. Then you focus most of your attention on communication and training. So making sure that people are always keeping their eye on that, the benefit of the change, and making sure that they're prepared to be able to use the new system and be able to execute the new process the most effective way.
As a VP of Technology and the CIO, I'm sure you're going to be overseeing the implementation roadmap and process in quite maniacal detail, I would imagine. Can you tell us, do you foresee any implementation challenges coming up along the way, or anything that you probably need to get ahead of as it pertains to implementing Dynamics 365 successfully?
Another good question. I would say that I think our biggest challenge is going to be because of the fact that the stakeholder organization that is absorbing the change, so that being Perry and Financial, they're managing the financials, pardon me, for half a dozen companies. And so each one of those companies will have its own sort of pace, its own rhythm, its own rate of activity that we have to accommodate. So it'll be more around making sure that we're not doing things that are going to disrupt those. So from a system point of view, not so much. It's really more around getting the engagement of the Parian people on the project team. That will be the single biggest challenge that we have, because they again need to be able to work at the rate that their stakeholders need them to work at. So getting, for example, the VP of Finance at Parian, getting her time scheduled is, I would say, the biggest challenge. The second one would be her 2IC and then the other direct reports, because again, they have to be able to respond to the retail companies that they're supporting.
I think that is a good place to end it, Peter. Thank you so much for doing this. Appreciate you sharing the insights of your business with us, on how you're leveraging technology and innovation to stand out, stand strong, provide great customer service and experiences for the companies and the people that you represent across the country. So thank you so much for sharing that. And thank you for your trust and your partnership with Microsoft. On behalf of the team, appreciate you taking the time to do this. Ted, thank you so much as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank
Enjoy
you,
the rest
Ted.
of the day. Cheers. Bye-bye.